Y'all, I am so excited today. I am here and we're focused on the series that we're leading called the Better Together Empowerment Series. And I am with Dr. Alex Gabbin, the founder of the National Black MBA Association back in 1970. Dr. Gabbin, how are you? And tell us, why was it so important for you to do some work that was focused on this concept of being better together?
Well, first of all, I'm doing fine, and thank you so much for inviting me, Tracy. You know, I always enjoy meeting and talking with you. You are absolute inspiration. And in fact, if you want to know why we were doing what we were doing back in 1970, it's because of what we wanted to see, which is what we're seeing now with the Tracy Harrells of the world doing what they're doing. And so that's exactly the case. And the thing that's critical, you know, in terms of your theme, the thing that is critical is that while each of us individually at the University of Chicago at that time were already slated individually to be able to have a decent career if things work well, we understood that it doesn't work that way. You know, you can't just go and talk about what you as an individual are going to do. You have to be concerned about the larger community. And our whole effort to pull together that meeting was because of the we involved, the us involved. And for those people who weren't even fortunate enough to be in the school like we were, what are we going to do about that community? Because we were in those schools then because of what was going on in the larger community. So there's a very much a connection there, you know, between us, that is the students who are in the business school working on an MBA, and what was going on in those communities with regard to our peers, with regard to our families, with regard to people who look just like us. And because of what was happening in those streets, all of a sudden opportunities opened up for people who were prepared like us to go ahead and step into that and take advantage of it. So we said, okay, fine. What's the connection now? We can't just go worry about getting a job and getting our own salaries and getting our own automobile. What's the connection? We got to figure out how we can take and leverage this opportunity for a larger good. And so that's what brought us together.
I love that. So this concept of better together, you're like, yeah, this
No
is
question.
kind of how it's done. So when we think about the civil rights movement, what was happening back then in 1970, we were truly creating new opportunities in a way that had never happened before. And you're saying we knew that we needed to unite for change, unite for collective change for our community. So for some people who are like, look, I'm just happy to have my job. For some people who are like, I don't know about this better together thing. What would you say to whether it's someone who's an ally or someone who is potentially, experiencing life, like we have?
Well,
What
I,
would
I
you
think it's I think it's important, you know, to point out while we like to celebrate the individuals who got together, and the individuals who got together is we had, you know, individuals from the University of Chicago at the time, sure, and we invited two members from 20 some different business schools around the nation to send two representatives from each of those schools to come to the meeting. So that's what we used as our founding. You know, we had our own students at the school. Then we had alumni who had already graduated from the University of Chicago. But I think the thing that I want to point out that I think is overlooked in our celebratory mode as we look back is that of the students who were at the University of Chicago at that time, that is the Black students, that is, African American students, only about half of them participated in the conference because everyone who participated had to go in and pay. Now get this. Now get this now. $25, you know, for the meals that were involved, the three meals that were involved over the 2 day conference. And there were a number of people who just didn't want to pay or who really didn't think to be bothered with all the coming to that conference. They didn't care about it. So to me, yes, there were students there who did care to get together. But there also, you got to recognize students who don't care or don't participate. And so as you're going about doing your work now, you can't be expecting it's going to be 100% turnout or that it's going to be a 90% turnout. You got to be prepared for the fact that different folk have different agendas. Some see it and some don't. And
right?
so you got to work with those who do and not let those who don't discourage you from the work by saying,
Yeah.
oh, gee whiz, why isn't this room full of people? Well, because not everybody wants to do it. Not everyone feels the same. And there
Right.
are some people who clearly say, just give me my job in my car, forget everyone else. That's
Yes.
part of what our tradition is also, and you got to be aware of that and be prepared
Mm,
to decide where you stand on this issue. Are
I
you one of
love
the
it.
ones who says, I want to participate for the larger good? Or are you saying, hey, yo, I've got my job, I'm doing my work, let them do theirs? You got both attitudes going on. You got to be prepared for those two dichotomies.
I love it. I actually call this Better Together Empowerment Series and some of the other work that I'm leading. I actually call them mountaintop experiences. So, to your point, I don't expect everyone to go. I don't expect everyone who even wants to go to make it, if that makes sense, right? I mean, I think there's some level of importance for us to say, we're documenting this journey. So if you're not ready, right? If you're not capable, if we're at the, if I'm a Sherpa, which is someone who is a guide to get to the mountaintop, part of that is we all are, right? We're all actually in a space to create change in a way that allows us to get to the next level, but also to leave a very clear roadmap for students, for professionals, for leaders, so that they know how to get there, like what they need to do to accomplish their goals in 2023 and 2024 and 2030, wherever we are, whenever this video is being shared, right? It's really important for us to really create a space for people to understand that it is our responsibility to leave that roadmap. So, in addition to hosting these live sessions, we're creating a book and a video series so that these voices, these lessons learned, these facts will be available for generations to come.
Well, I will also say, adding to your thoughts, is that while we clearly wanted to do something that was going to be helpful for our people, and that we felt that an organization was going to be needed to do that. When Tony passed a couple of years ago. In fact, right before we were getting ready to have our 50th anniversary, Tony passed. And Bradshaw, of course, the other third person. There were three of us who organized that 1970 conference. And Bradshaw had passed much, much earlier. But when Tony and I, right prior to when we were getting ready to celebrate the 50th, when Tony and I came to one of the National Black NBA meetings down in Orlando, about 8 years ago or so, we were flat out overwhelmed and amazed when we went to the career conference. We just were amazed by it. Seeing all those black people looking so good. Going up in there, seeing all these major firms, with people in line with their resumes and jobs out there. And we sat at the bar and just said, Tony, can you believe it? Gab, can you believe it? Can you believe it? I'm saying that to say this, Tracy. In 1970, we knew we wanted to get together to form an organization because we wanted to try to find a way to do something better. In 1970, we did not visualize what we saw in Orlando.
Right.
It was clearly something we would have loved, hoped for, wanted, but we couldn't even see that far, that it would look that good, that it would be
Right.
that big, that it would take on that form. So I'm saying this to you. In the process of doing your work, you may not be able to see what's happening 50 years later, or 30 years later, or 20 years later. You're doing your work is saying, I will not be the link that broke. I'm going to do what I can right now, not knowing where it's going to go, but I got to do something. And we got to try to put something together that might have a way of surviving and carrying it on further. It's the folks later who will go ahead on and determine the direction for how it happens. It's the folks later who will go ahead on and work out the details. All you're doing right now is saying, I got to do something to put something in place so that we can address this issue. That's all we did. So then we cannot back in 1970 says, oh yeah, we clarified. We knew that one day Tracy would be on here having and writing books. Get out of here. We were trying to get the money together to play that first conference hall.
Right. I love it.
We're trying to go in and get as many brothers and sisters as possible who are not participating to participate.
Right.
We were trying to go in and get the schools to see if they can go in and get them. I mean, we were trying to just get this thing so that we can have our first 1-2 day meeting, for goodness sake. We weren't visualizing what was happening later. So don't be so discouraged by the fact that right now, you don't see what is going to be down the road. You do what you have to do right now. You do what you have
Yes.
to do right now to try to do something that's going to result in something being better. But if you form an institution, or if you form something that's going to be a carrier, how that thing is going to work out later is going to be who's in the driver's
Mm.
seat later. You can't necessarily say you're going to set up something and then you can know what it's going to look like later. So I guess that's my point. You work now. I always like to go back to that scripture in the Bible that says, I, Paul, planted, Apollos watered, but it's
Mm.
God who gave the increase. And I think you have to be sensitive to the fact that it is more than one person. And even though you're doing all that you can right now, it still has to be blessed if
Mm.
it's going to grow, which means
Mm.
that the thing that you need to be working on is the thing that he put in your heart in the beginning, so that it is for his glory and not yours you're doing it.
Yes.
That's where it is coming from. Now, I know folks get all concerned about this, sounds a little bit too preachy for me. And I end up, hey, look, you
Listen,
invited me to come tell you what I thought about my journey.
listen.
You're
I
not going
can
to hear about my journey without hearing about the fact that that's the way it happened. Now, some
I
other folks
love
can
it.
do it a different way. God bless you. But this is the way I went. And this is the way it happened in my life.
I love it. And the beauty of what you said is I agree with you like 1,000%, right? I will invite hundreds of people to be a part of this series, and I can't testify to what everyone's going to say about everything. I won't be able to agree with everything that everybody says, but I don't want to agree with anything more than what you just said about the importance of us really doing what was put on our heart by our creator, being able to do this work. This is absolutely my passion, because it is why I was put on this earth. So I appreciate you saying that, and I do think that's critical. One of the things I wanted to add as a part of this journey, and I've heard you tell this story before, but I think it's really powerful and important that we put it into the universe now. We're creating an archive, right? We're creating an archive for the next generation. So if I were to ask you, Dr. Gabbin, to describe one of those, like, just key lessons learned, and you call it your escalator analogy, like, of what people can do, what we can do, and I call it keeping it moving. But you have a deeper way of sharing. Can you tell us a little bit about one of your lessons learned, about what we can learn from your journey, and how we can continue to do better together to really commit to progress? And again, our three areas: we foster an inclusion, we're elevating the Black businesses, supporting Black businesses and Black wealth, and we're empowering youth development. So we got three focus areas as well that we're focused on, and all of those are massive in nature. Tell us
I'm
about
going to
the
start. I'm
strategy.
going to
Yes.
start with Senator Calhoun. I'm going to start with Senator Calhoun. No, Hammond. So sorry. So sorry. Senator Hammond. He was from South Carolina. He was in Congress back in the 1800s. And this is what the Senator Hammond said in the 1800s on the floor of Congress. He says, the senator from New York yesterday said that all the world had abandoned slavery. I, the name, but not the thing.
Say that again.
The name, but not the thing. And so, what Hammond was saying in dealing with this issue about slavery in the United States is that people were arguing that we shouldn't have slavery, we should get rid of it. And Hammond and one particular senator from New York had mentioned that all the civilized world had abandoned slavery. Why are we still doing it? And Hammond's response was, yes, the name has been abandoned, but not the thing.
Mm.
And so effectively what he was saying was that even if you did not call it slavery,
Mm.
the system is set up to make certain that the same dynamic remains in place.
Mm.
Now, I'm mentioning him, and I'll come to the elevator story in a minute. I'm mentioning him because that is exactly what is true in 1970 and is true in 2023. The name has been abandoned, but not the thing. So that effectively, then you are always fighting against the thing. And all you ever see happening over the years is a change in the name. So what we've got here is in our country in particular, because people argue about has there been any progress? Well, let me approach it this way. You may not know, but it wasn't until the 1950s or so that women were qualified to play violin well enough to be on a symphony for the different states. They just didn't know how to play violin. That's all there was to it. They didn't play well enough. They'd gone to auditions, they tried out, they just never made it. And then someone had the bright idea, I think it was in Boston, to go ahead on and put carpet on the floor and a screen curtain across the stage so that those who were listening to the music, when the woman auditioned or the person auditioned, could not tell who was coming into the audition. They couldn't hear any footsteps. They couldn't see any person. And so those who were part of the judging group sitting on the other side of the curtain, all they could judge was the music. Sure enough, once there was a carpet on the floor, once there was a curtain across the stage, and once the only thing the judges could judge was the music, all of a sudden, a woman qualified to be on a symphony. Now, when I say false meritocracy, what I'm saying is that individuals try to pretend that everything is fair and that we just giving everybody a fair chance. But until you get a carpet on the floor and a curtain across the screen, Black folk ain't gonna get no fairness, with regard to the system out there. So when I talk about that escalator story, my view of it is this. When you take a look at the escalator going up, and I like the example of the one in Atlanta, Georgia in particular, because it seemed like when you get off that train and get ready to go up that escalator, it looks like it's going all the way up to heaven.
You mean at the airport?
This is Atlanta, Georgia. In the Atlanta, Georgia airport. And you got one there in Seattle. I was checking out your escalators over there in Seattle too. That you get off that train and you start looking, that bad boy's going up in the sky, right? And most people, of course, they go ahead and they get on the up escalator to go on up to the next level. That's fine. But what I say is this. What I want, imagine you doing, I don't want you to go stand on the up escalator to go up. I want you to go up the down escalator. Now, to go up the down escalator, I say there are three things that are absolutely necessary. The first is that you got to make an effort. Because if you just go ahead on, you can just stand on the up escalator and it'll take you on up. But if you want to go up the escalator that's coming down, you got to make an effort. You just can't go and stand on it and go anywhere. The second thing that's important is that you have to make an effort that is greater than the downward force of that escalator. Because if you got some wimpy effort, then it's just not going to be enough to overcome that downward force. And you're going to get nowhere. But it's the third point, Tracy, that I consider to be absolutely critical and essential. The third point. The third point in going up the down escalator is you've got to make an effort, yes. The effort has to be enough to overcome the downward force, yes. But you got to go all the way.
You got to do what?
You got to go all the way up.
All the way.
You can't get halfway up that escalator, get tired, stop moving your legs, and you're back down on the first floor again. You can't get 90% of the way up that down escalator, working hard as you could be, overcoming the downward force. Got all the way up there, 90% of the way up there, you're almost near the top, and then you just start congratulating yourself of how well you've been doing. You just start telling the world how great you are. Stop moving those legs when you're 90% of the way up that escalator, and you're right back down on the first floor again. To go up the down escalator, you got to make an effort. The effort has to be enough to overcome the downward force, and you got to go all the way up. We still in the process of going all the way up, because when you are looking like us in this society where the name has changed but not the thing.
Mm.
You are still on an up, you're going up a down escalator. What do I mean? The system is not set up to promote you. The system is not set up to encourage you. The system is not set up to raise you to a higher level. That system is set up to benefit somebody else. And so you are assigned to the up escalator by the way laws are interpreted. You are assigned to the up escalator by the way people look at you. You are assigned automatically to the up escalator by virtue of them not having a carpet on the floor or a curtain across the stage. And so when you're on that up, and thank goodness there are people who are on the up escalator who were kind enough to look over and try to help some of us out. Thank goodness there are people who are decent enough to recognize that the system is skewed and they're going to try to be as helpful as they can. But they're still on the up escalator themselves. We're the ones going up the down escalator. And in going up that down escalator, we've got to keep on moving. And so now when you start judging progress between 1970 and 2023, yeah, things have changed. It's the name that have changed, not the thing. And so when you see yourself struggling for the same things in 2023 that we were struggling for in 1990, that's because they changed the way they're doing the deal, but they haven't changed the deal, you know. And so effectively now you're constantly coming up with ways to fight the new battles that are out there. You're coming up with ways to counteract the new strategies that are used. You're coming up with ways to go ahead and try to mix it up and do better in this kind of way, better in that kind of way, because the name has changed, but not the thing. And what is that thing? It's a bias system, because they look at you and they say your music not good enough right from the beginning. And until you keep constructing a way to get yourself a carpet on the floor and a curtain across the screen, you're never going to be qualified in that way. And so we have to keep working towards that day of the carpet and the curtain. So that the system now is not biased against us. And we don't constantly have to be on it. So when you look like you or look like me, don't even get yourself upset about it. Get them legs moving.
Yo, today's session, thank you, Dr. Gabbin. Today's session is really about the why. Why is it important that we do this work? Why is it important that we don't just sit back on our laurels? He just told y'all we can't. By definition, the system is not aligned to allow us to sit back, right? We have to keep it moving. Dr. Gabbin, that is, when people don't know you, they don't know the impact that you had by founding an organization that's been around since 1970, an organization that has now 42 chapters, I think it is, 41, 42 chapters around the country, 10,000 members, 25,000 from what I heard from nationals recently, collaborators around the country with organizations that we're deeply connected to. So like you've done a thing that is really about changing the status quo. And this series is called Better Together because we believe we can accomplish more things together. Now, if you, as you know, we have 3 focus areas. The first one is focused on fostering inclusion in business, fostering inclusion within colleges, organizations, right, in the corporate space in general, right? Because this idea of fostering inclusion is not new. So my question to you is, and we know when you have, say, the employee resource groups or the diversity resource groups at each individual company, you only have a certain amount of power to actually drive change, right?
Yeah.
You're a student union at one school, you only have so much power. But when you bring those student unions together, when you bring those employee resource groups together, your voice is elevated. And I just want you to share a little bit with people about why this concept of better together really is better.
It's very difficult. I won't say impossible, but it's difficult to have leverage on your own. You need to have input. You need to have support. You need to have individuals of like mind, who are trying to get some things done. Trying to be a lone ranger or stuff of this sort. I mean, there are some things that probably can work well by yourself, but I don't think organizational change is one of them.
Right.
You need to have diversity of thought and opinion for one thing. I mean, you need to have the critical thing that should be unitary is the heart. Are you
Mm.
interested in doing the same work? Now, the talents you bring to it, yes, that needs to be diverse. The opinions, yes, that needs to be diverse. But it's the objective, it's the spirit. What are you trying to do? So you get people together of like spirit, and then
Mhm.
they go ahead on and they can accomplish a lot. But if you just try to go by yourself, then it's probably not going to last very well. And I think too, and I got to come back to this basic theme because I don't want you to overlook it. Um, I don't think that you can be satisfied with yourself if you don't do what he's put in you. So that
Mm.
when you see the direction that you've been guided in, the task you've been asked to take on, even if you do have to stand by yourself on it, I don't think you're going to be satisfied if you're not doing what he put in you. I mean, I'm not saying that you
Mhm.
won't be wealthy. You can be wealthy. I'm not saying that you can't be successful in terms of worldly things. You'll be successful in terms of worldly things. I'm not saying that you can't rise in the corporate world and get titles and all the rest of that. I believe you can do all that kind of stuff and do that without him. But what you won't have is satisfaction.
Mm.
What you're not going to have is joy.
Mm.
What you're not going to have is that feeling that it is well with my soul. I mean, I don't think that you're going to be able to be satisfied with whatever you get if you're not being consistent with doing the thing he gave you the talent to do and the skill to do.
Mm.
And when you're taking a look at a group like this here, people like you, I'm sorry, unto whomsoever much is given, come on now. You know the routine. So much is expected. When you've
Absolutely.
been given all that you've been given with your background and your education and your opportunities and your exposure, excuse me, this thing wasn't just so that you could be comfortable. This thing was so that you could reach out and help those who are unable or haven't been given those same kind of opportunities
Yes.
to do his will. I'm sorry. I know it sounds preachy, and I'm not a preacher. I would not be taking up a collection after the offering. After the program here. You don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to have my hand in your pocket. But I do believe, based upon what I've seen, and that there's this poem, that comes out that I've heard that says, "Old lambs know the way. Young sheep gotta find the way." I'm an old lamb.
I
So
love
your
it.
listening to me is just yo, and I'm not saying I'm the only old lamb you ought to listen to, but I do think you ought to go ahead and take it into consideration. Well, another way of you can look at it too, it says is old men for wisdom, young men for war.
See, see.
Old men for wisdom, young men for war. I've sort of kind of like run my race now. Come on now.
Wow.
I mean, when you get to be 3 score and 10, and if by reason of strength there be 4 score, yo, there isn't too much battle left in you. Now you got a whole lot to say because you've seen a whole lot, but there
Right.
isn't a whole lot of stuff on the battlefield for you. There's some doggone young warriors out there like those Tracy's, that
Yes.
got to go ahead
Yes.
on and get up and
Yes.
start doing that battleground stuff. But you listen to the wisdom, you decide what makes sense to you, you go ahead and you pray about it, and then you get busy.
Mm. Did you just say get busy? Pray about it and get busy. So basically, activate. So, Dr. Gabbin, the last thing I wanted to say, just specifically related to this concept of these three focus areas. We talked about the first one being fostering inclusion in business. The second one is really a focus on Black business and Black wealth. And in the interest of time, the third one is really about empowering youth development. And the National Black MBA has a program called Leaders of Tomorrow. We've been focused on youth development for a while. We're going to be able to create some entrepreneurial youth. We're going to be able to, like you said, spread some lessons learned as a part of this series as well to our youth, high school, college, and young professionals. So, why would you say it's so important that we do pour into our youth? Why is that piece of this uh, focus areas? Why is that so important?
I think that's almost obvious. I mean, it's almost obvious. I mean, it's almost you have to be concerned, with your next generation. You have to be concerned with your youth. I mean, it's almost obvious. And I think another thing that is interesting, you start thinking about your own youth.
Mm,
You start thinking about your own vulnerability. You
yes.
start thinking about where would you be. There used to be this song in church I used to hear a lot. It says, somebody prayed for me, had me on their mind, took the time and prayed for me. I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed for me. I'm sorry. You don't tell me, you don't find any people right now successful later. And they can,
Right.
in a sense, look back on the bridges that brought them over. That's the point.
That is the point. That
That's
is
all it is to
absolutely the
go ahead
point.
on.
I love
And
it.
in the same way that someone did it for you, doggone it, it's your turn now. So
Right.
yes, you're going to help them. And not only are you going to help them, you're going to help them do more than you did.
Mm.
Be better than you were. Be stronger and wiser than you were. That's what you're going to help them to do.
That is the point. I mean, that is absolutely the point of this entire series. We are better together, and if we unite, collaborate, connect, and share our lessons learned on these three specific focus areas, there is no way the next generation is not set up for success. I mean, there's no way that they're not going to be able to, again, learn from mistakes, learn from our own successes, but also co-create together what success looks like for them. This is really about a co-creation. There's some things that people have done that we're going to be sharing, but we're also going to be co-creating solutions. George Zeno actually was the one who just called me, and he was talking about this idea of the co-creation. So this is my last question, Dr. Gabbin, as it relates to hearing the voice of others, that is a critical part of this series. It is a critical part of the book and the videos, and it's the live sessions. It's a critical part of why we need to come together. What would you say, any invitation, any call to action, when we say, hey, we need to hear your voice? We wanted you to share your story. We want you to share your lessons learned. What words would you say to a professional, an ally, or anyone who thinks any of these three focus areas is something that they want to be a part of improving, providing solutions to? What would you say to someone to invite them to be a part of true change?
There is a strategy that is used that says divide and conquer. And the reason why divide and conquer can be such a useful strategy is that one of the mistakes that is easy for talented Black people to make is to think that they're all by themselves, that there's no one out there like them, that they're the first ones to run into this problem or to see this issue. And the more you collaborate, the more you learn and get out there and talk to other people, the more you see that, hey, wait a minute, you feel like this too. You've had this happen to you also. And then you start feeling that maybe your errors are not as bad because you're just trying to find your way just like others are. You need to talk to people so that you can, because the most powerful thing, or one of the most powerful things that's important when people, when they're working on something, is their level of self-confidence. Individuals have said that 80% of your altitude is determined by your attitude, and your
Yes.
collaborating with people does a lot to help you develop a healthy attitude. And if you can
Yes.
get a good, healthy attitude, then you now have a better chance of getting more altitude out of the efforts that you want to make. And so when you're by yourself, you just keep thinking that this is the first time around. It's not the first time around. This is not the first, you're not the first person to run into this.
Right.
And you are not unique. Rare, yes, but not unique.
Special, yes, but
Special, yes, but not unique.
but
Go
not
ahead
you.
and find out what's going on with these other people
I
who look
love it.
like you.
I love it. Dr. Gabbin. I don't know if I told you this, but one of the reasons is kind of behind my why is when I was in corporate, and again, I worked for some great companies, 8 years at IBM, 14 years at Disney, 5 years at Microsoft, all companies that have the same challenge, right? We're going to have some leaders from different organizations join us as a part of this series who are willing to talk about what's working and what isn't. But I had a young Black girl who was an intern, and she came into my office and wanted to commit suicide because of the experience she was having, because no one told her about the system. And she was about to be sent home. She was a marketing person. They put her into a sales role and gave her some quotas. And she's like, this ain't what I do. She's like, Miss Tracy, I don't understand. Right. And so the fact that we ended the conversation laughing, I was like, girl, give me your number so we can call your mother. Because your mother may not even understand the system. If she's not in the corporate, I was the first person in my family to go to college, right? To go to a 4-year college to actually be in this corporate space. So I was like, let's call your mom, right? So she understands you did not fail here. We failed you. And the system has failed us all. So if we don't unite, if we don't drive change, then we're not changing the status quo. We're not going to be able to accomplish, to your point, what is put into our souls, what we are required to do based on the blessings that we've already experienced. How do we create a space for youth to be encouraged, for youth to feel a level of empowerment? It's basically by telling them and sharing with them that they're not alone, that there is a system. There's something that's happened, and we've all had some experiences, and here's some of the lessons learned, but we also kind of co-create solutions as well.
Those who do not know their history will repeat it.
Say it again, say it again.
Those who do not know history will repeat it. So then the mistakes of the past will be repeated if you have not learned from the mistakes of the past. If you don't know what has happened, you're more likely to repeat it again. You've got to go ahead on and learn from the past so that you can then go ahead on and be in a better shape to go forward. And that's what happens to us. And the assumption somehow is that the system is there to help you. That's fallacious. That system was not set up for you. You are invading that system. And when too many of you are there, then you get to be a threat within that system. And so, at some point, the higher you go up that pyramid, the more vicious the infighting gets to go higher. You've got to be prepared for that.
Got to be prepared. Y'all, this is just the first spotlight with Dr. Alex Gabbin. Dr. Gabbin, thank you for agreeing to be a part of this core team, being a part of this initiative, being a part of these continued conversations. We have a number of sessions. Like I said, we're pulling this together into a book and a video series. We're going to make sure that there's a clear roadmap, and anybody who wants to get to the next level, who wants to have a mountaintop experience in these areas around fostering inclusion in their business, around supporting Black businesses and Black wealth, around empowering youth development in every way possible, then they got a place to go. So we invite you to be a part of this community in action is what we are. And we're focused on 3 things: awareness, action, and accountability. And together we can drive change. Because what, Dr. Gabbin, it's better what? Together?
Yeah, I hear you.
It's better together, y'all.
Good luck to you, Tracy. And thank you so much for doing the work.
Thank you for being such an inspiration. More to come.